Hi there, I'm Alistair Atkin from Atkin Guitars. We're in Camden, which is like a musical mecca in London. We're in Guitar. We've been selling guitars to Guitar for the last 20 years. It's really nice to be here. We're doing an in-store tonight, the 24th of April. We're going to do a YouTube show, so please watch this. There's going to be some talking about the company, a bit of a Q&A, and yeah, enjoy the show.
Here we are again, another fantastic event. It's an amazing evening we have today. Thank you so much to Atkin Guitars for coming and bringing some spectacular guitars here, which you'll all have a chance to play later, I promise you. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Alistair Atkin himself.
Oh, how are we doing? Right, oh, we didn't organise this very well, did we? I've got smaller. Good evening, London. I've always wanted to say that. Thanks for coming down. And thank you for Guitar for hosting this. We've had a long connection with Guitar, and are you all Guitar customers? Yes. Bought guitars here, visit this one. Have you visited some of the other ones? Got some Epsom people here at all? Maybe, yeah, there you go. Brilliant. Yeah. Well, you made it all the way. That's good. Well, we're based down in Canterbury, and for us, this is our closest dealer, really, and we can get on the train at Canterbury and be here in this shop within an hour, which is really great for us. So this seemed like a great place to start trying one of these sorts of evenings, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I started the business. This sort of journey that you go on when you start this sort of career, it's you kind of get addicted to making guitars. You probably all have the same thing when you're picking up a guitar, and you know, as kids we'd pick them up and just kind of look at them for the first hour, and then you know, you start playing them and you see your idols using them. And that's how I got into this. I was a guitarist as a young lad. I've got two friends of mine here that I haven't seen, this guy here I haven't seen for 35 years, and we played in a band together when we were at school. So it was always about the music for me, and then it was about songs and songwriting, and I was never somebody who was really into technical guitar players and all the sort of wizardry that goes about that. It was always about sort of a connection with a piece of music, and it was at that point I realised the power of the acoustic guitar was just so awesome, and I'd spend sort of hours just listening to, I don't know, Nick Drake. Has anyone gone down that rabbit hole? Yeah, I think my mother thought I was going to do myself in for about 5 years when you lock yourself in your bedroom and you're listening to Pink Moon for weeks on end. But that was kind of the stuff that really connected with me. And then I'd get into Jethro Tull and yeah, all this sort of rocky, sort of folky music, and you know, Led Zeppelin, and you'd hear that stuff on those albums that was just the acoustic sort of part of it, and the powerful side of that just always resonated with me. So when I was about, I think, 14, back then you used to have CDT, which was Craft Design Technology, and for people like me, heavily dyslexic, not very good at maths, all the stuff that you'd sort of, the academics would lean towards. We had this sort of mecca room at the school, which was the art department, and you could hide there for days, and it looked like you were working. And so I'd end up sort of spending my time there. And at that point, for a project, I decided to make an electric guitar, which was one of those things that I felt compelled to get into. And I met a guitar maker locally to us called Andy Crockett, and he had a workshop nearby, and I'd go and sort of annoy him and buy bits of things, you know, pickups and the wood and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, just found this place that I really enjoyed being, and could find that time would just go, and you know, 10 hours would go like that. And I think for anyone who is lucky enough to have that situation in their job, you just find that that's the most wonderful thing. So and then the addiction started, and one of many, I must say, but no. So I realised there was a course up in London at that point, at the London School of Furniture, and they had a guitar making course there, and I went up to the college. It was in the Commercial Road, just in the nearest tube stop was Aldgate East. And for somebody who's from Canterbury, lived a pretty sheltered life, arriving in the East End at the age of 18 was a little bit harsh. And certainly 35 years ago, it was a very different place to how it is now. And I walked into this college and thought, geez, this is frightening, you know. And there were loads of, you know, different age groups there, all at these benches, and we were set to make classical guitars. So you had to make a classical guitar in your first year, and I think the course I did was a 2-year course, and it was an OND. Has anyone else got an OND? I've got one. It's called an Ordinary National Diploma, and I've dined out on that for years. So yeah, we ended up making these guitars, and at the college there were some other guitar makers. Patrick Egle went there years and years before I did, obviously, and he was one of those people that you heard his name and thought, oh well, if he did this course, it might be quite good. So and Patrick at that point was producing, I think he had a factory in Birmingham, and he was one of the only guitar makers of sort of my generation who was making a decent living at it, or well, whether he was making a decent living, but he was certainly making a noise, and he was competing with some of the other sort of bigger makers in the world, which was, you know, exciting. There was also a guy, does anyone remember Beth Orton? So Ted Barnes was her guitar player, and he was on that course as well. So there were lots of musicians, and there were a lot of people who were just there, I think, to waste time, thought, you know, guitar making, that sounds fun. And I don't think many of us actually ended up making a career out of it. And getting a job at that point in guitar making was almost impossible in this country. It's opened up a bit now, and you know, we still get a lot of youngsters asking us for employment, and can they come and see the workshop. So the industry in this country has changed quite a lot in that 30 years. So yeah, I did my 2 years at the London School of Furniture, and I couldn't wait to get out of London. It was just too much. And making guitars in this environment isn't really the best place to be. So I headed back to Canterbury. I managed to get a place with this other guitar maker I mentioned, Andy Crockett. And he was a repairer, or still around, is in his 70s now. And he also made classical guitars and electric guitars. So I had this like little bench in the corner, and I thought, I'm going to learn to make dreadnought guitars. I'm a massive Crosby, Stills and Nash fan, so that album cover with Stephen Stills sitting on the sofa playing the dreadnought was, to me, one of those things that just connected. And so I spent a number of years just making dreadnought guitars over and over again. And that's what you need to do when you're in this line of work. You just need to sort of repeat, and try and learn the essence of what makes a guitar work. And then you get this other terrible problem, which is, how do I make money out of this? And back then you could sign on the dole, and you could sort of do a sneaky kind of, I'm looking for work, but and at one point I got rumbled, and I had to stop signing on the dole, and I needed to actually make some money at this. I remember the first guy who came into the workshop was this old boy who wanted a Panormo classical guitar, and he said, "Can you make me one of those?" And I said, "Yeah, I can make you one of those." I then took his deposit. I looked round to Andy and said, "What the is a Panormo guitar?" And then there's no internet, and found a book, and it's like, oh Jesus, it's really difficult. And they're a classical guitar with lots of there's pearl on there, and you have to make the rosettes and all that sort of stuff. And I probably spent like I don't know, best part of 4 months making this thing, and I think he paid me 300 quid for it. But at that moment, it was like, oh, I've just sold a guitar, and does that mean I'm a guitar maker? I'm a kind of professional guitar maker, but I had all my friends who went off to university, and they would come back and they had real jobs and they had real money, and you have this sort of moment where you think, am I doing the right thing here? But always making the guitars was the thing that kept me going. And you'd have to hawk your wares round guitar shops, and no one wants to know a new guitar maker. It's like, yeah, they're thinking, who on earth is this guy? This, you know, and you're making this stuff, and at the beginning it might not be that good, but you just have to try and sell it, and you have to try and find a way of selling it that you sort of can believe you're not doing people over. You want this to be a nice experience for everybody, and so gradually, you know, you'd sell. A big one was you'd take guitars to Denmark Street, and in fact, where's Paul? Yeah, there's Paul over there who works for us now. But some of you might know Paul because he worked in Denmark Street for 30 odd years, and that's where I met Paul actually. And you'd go up there and you'd put guitars in guitar shops on commission, and the big one was Andy's Guitars. And does anyone remember Andy's? Yeah. Did anyone ever sell anything in Andy's? Well, you would probably did the right thing because you never got paid by Andy. He would always be like, oh, yeah, I'm a bit short this week. And then you'd go up there and go, oh, you've sold 3 guitars. You go, yeah, that was yesterday. Yesterday we sold them. I'll send you the money in a month. And getting money out of some of these guys was horrendous. And but, you know, just kept on sort of pushing at it, and gradually found, you know, that the odd thing would sell, and luckily then I didn't seem to need to eat and or go anywhere. You know, it was just sort of all locked in the workshop, and as long as I was in there I felt happy. And so I would take these little trips, and I think one was Hobgoblin in Crawley. That was one that they'd sell sort of English folk instruments, take that as you will, and you'd sort of meet some of these guys and make a little connection, and gradually things would start moving. And I thought, yeah, I'll carry on. And I think at one point I had to get a job in a library. Then I worked in a bookshop, and I enjoyed that. And but I'd always come back in the evening and start making guitars again. And at one point, a friend of mine who went to the school across the road got signed by one of the big record companies, and he had one of my guitars. And then he was set to be songwriting with other guitar or other songwriters, and they often, you might have seen these camps where songwriters get together, and they'll sort of, you know, actually it happened with another friend of mine. She ended up writing with Ed Sheeran. He didn't know who he was, and then they write the big hits, and that's how a lot of those sort of songwriting things go. And they tend to, if one of them's got one of your guitars, that's a great way of getting into, you know, those circles through the sort of the back room of the music industry. All these people who are none of us have heard of, but are always writing, and they're writing hits. And so the next person that Andy wrote with was a guy called Boo Hewerdine, and I'd heard of him because he'd written Patience of Angels for Eddie Reader, and he bought this guitar, and then that unlocked the world of sort of the folky world in England for me, and I started making guitars for loads of, you know, small bands and singer-songwriters, but that kept it ticking over. And at that point I was working by myself, and I think making maybe 20 or 30 guitars a year. And I did that for probably 5 years, and then gradually sort of bought more and more equipment. And you realise that buying any equipment for guitars, nothing is off the shelf. You have to have it made. You always need to know an engineer who knows how to to make this thing come alive, you know, you might need a side bending machine or something like that. And so I spent all my money on tools, and but it was always with that goal of trying to make a better guitar. And that if you talk to any guitar maker, that is the thing that we're all striving to do. And none of us will ever be happy. We're always kind of go, oh, I really like that one, but I think I could do better. And that's how all of us work. And when you lose that, that's kind of when you get those guitar companies that perhaps, you know, you have that golden era and that golden era is past. So it's always been our ambition to make sure we don't lose that sort of spark, really. So yeah, I was working by myself, and then one night I went to the pub and I met this guy, and he said, "Can I have a job?" And I was like, "Well, what do you do?" And he'd been a furniture maker, a guy called Danny Martin. So I thought, well, he's not going to start his own guitar company, so I'll employ him. And he came to work for me one day a week, and I'm thinking, what am I going to get this guy to do? So I'd sort of get him feeding the thicknesser or something like that, and gradually he learned all the sort of smarts of what I was doing, and I could hand over some of the work to him, and we got to the point where we might make 50 guitars a year. At this point, we weren't selling to guitar shops at that point, and I think it got to the stage where a good friend of mine called Doug Chandler. Does anyone remember Chandler Guitars in Richmond? Yeah. So Doug lives near us, and he came over, and I was talking to him about how I might expand this business. He goes, "Well, you've got to go and get some dealers." And Doug knew everybody, and he introduced me to Ivan Morantz and Guitar, and so I started, you know, and at that point you have to make a trade price, so all your pricing changes, and you think, crikey, how am I going to make any money now? And but you have to get your head around it, and you have to invest again in more accurate machinery, all those things that make that job a little bit easier and a little bit faster, and you can repeat the process. So yeah, and me and Danny worked, I think, together for 10 years, and I never really knew how to expand the business. And you'd watch, you know, I'd meet other guitar makers at guitar shows, you know. Once I had Bill Collings come to the workshop, because Doug used to distribute his guitars. So I went out for a meal with them, and afterwards I said, "Bill, can you come to the workshop, please?" And he's like, "Oh man, I got to do some work." And I said, "Yeah, you do actually. Please come to the workshop." And so I got Bill over, and he was amazing, and he really went through a load of stuff with me, but he spoke to me in riddles, really. He never gave me the actual information I needed. But he was really nice, and he said, "Look, you're doing a good job. You can carry on and do this, this, and this." And I implemented those things, and life got a bit easier. And then a little bit later, I met this guy who lived sort of in Canterbury, and he ran a pickup company called Tone Rider. Now, some of you may have heard of that, but they're made in China, and his name's Andrew Cunningham, and he'd worked in China for years, and he came to the workshop, and he was like, "Is this all it is? I thought there was more going on. I thought you were a bigger company." I said, "No, I'm having trouble actually working out how to advance this." And he said, "Right, can I come and work for you for a month? You don't have to pay me. Just come in, and I'm going to watch what you're doing, and we're going to formulate a plan." And so I was brilliant, you know. And I was thinking, what's the catch? What does Andrew actually want, you know? And he came in, and he watched everything, and because he'd worked in these big factories, he could see our method of working was so unorganized. And when you work in a proper workshop where there's multiple people there, it's a bit like working in a kitchen, you know. And you've seen those shows where the sous chef's passing this to them, and everything's about timing. And that's actually what guitar making is like as well. And if you don't get that stuff right, the whole thing falls apart. And Andrew really taught me how to make that work. And the next thing was like, well, you're going to need some more people now, Alistair. I was like, oh, really employ more people? You know, it's scary. But we had like an order from the Fellowship of Acoustics in the Netherlands. And Rudy, who owns that shop, had said to me, if you can make 100 guitars, I'll buy them. And I was like, oh, that sounds a bit hard. But so Andrew was like, you've got an order for 100 guitars and you're not making them. Well, we need to make that work, you know. And the next thing, I'd met a guy called Kieran McNally, an Irish lad who worked for Loudon. And he'd started working by himself, and he was working for a coffee company at the time. And I'd been at the Berlin Guitar Show with him and thought, oh, he's an interesting guy. And he'd been the production manager at Loudon. So I called up Kieran and said, do you fancy moving to Canterbury? He's like, oh, yeah, all right, I'll come over and have a look. And, excuse me, and he liked what he saw. We got on pretty well. And we sat down with Andrew and we worked out a plan how to sort of grow this thing. Danny was still there, I was there, Kieran was there. So I think at that point there were just the three of us. This must have been nearly 10 years ago now. And so we started working, and then we found, I think in the first year of the three of us working, we got our numbers up considerably, and then I think Lawrence, who's over there, I've known Lawrence for years as well, and he was like, because we put a little advert on the website saying if you want a job, get in touch. And Lawrence was a guitar teacher at that point, and had always come to the workshop and said, oh, I'm really interested in becoming a guitar maker. Can I try out? And the way you do that is that you invite somebody into your workshop for a couple of days, show them a bit about what you do and get them to do some hands-on work. The agreement being, you know, if they like it and we like them, then yeah, we can try this. And so Lawrence came on board, we had a great time. And then we started working up these little stations of where you can make stuff. And gradually we started to unlock production. And the key really is just to, you know, be very organised about that, and you know, don't stray from the path. So that's the way it started going, and then gradually more and more guys got involved. And yeah, today we've got there's 15 of us making the guitars, and we had one unit. Now we've got 3 units. We had one CNC machine. Now we've got 5. We've got a Plek machine, and all the stuff that all the bigger players do, we started to get involved with. But the one thing that I'd noticed about a lot of those guys was once they started growing, they lost the essence of what their instruments were originally like. So it became so important to make sure that didn't happen to us. And so the sort of the main theme was, you know, if you're going to get a machine to do a job, it can only take over when it's as good or better than when we were making it by hand. And so that's what we did, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And we've sort of, yeah, really honed our skills. We've got a lot of great techniques, some of them invented in our workshop. And you know, we've had other makers now ask us how we're doing stuff, and you kind of get to that point where you feel a bit more established. But one thing that suddenly changed everything was this aged finish that we do. And is anyone familiar with? Do you know about our finish? If you do, you'll know that we do a super thin nitrocellulose finish, and it's checked, and it's probably at least half as thick as most other guitar makers. And at one point we sort of did a relic guitar, a really scratched up looking thing, because we dropped one of the guitars in the workshop, and I was like, oh God, what are we going to do with that? And I'd always wanted to try one of these, and I put it on the website, and it sold like that. And it was like, oh, that's interesting, let's do another. And they just kept on selling. At the same time, you'd get these people ranting about how much they hated the fact that we'd relic these guitars. But if you run any kind of social media, you'll know that half the battle is getting anybody to engage with anything that you do. So actually, a lot of angry people was good as long as the other half weren't angry and were enjoying what we were doing. It was working. So we started doing more and more of the aged finish. We stopped scratching them up quite as much and just thought, well, let's make a guitar that perhaps your grandfather had been sort of keeping really, beautifully in the case. He always wiped it down, but this thing had the feel of an 80-year-old guitar, and that's what we've been trying to do. And it seems to be something that has now connected with a lot of people, and a lot of guitar makers are starting to age acoustic guitars, and it's become a thing. At one point, I answered an email for this guy who wanted to order one of these. That's our white rice model, and he was like, "Yeah, can you?" And he sent me his credit card details and the address, and it was Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty mad. And I thought, well, shall I ask him? So I wrote back and said, "Hi, thanks for the order. Anything to do with Martin Guitars?" And he wrote back and said, "Yeah, I'm the head of the custom shop at Martin. Yeah, we're interested in what you're doing." And I was like, yes, this is gonna do something. And I said, "Are you guys going to do this?" And he goes, "Yeah, we're looking at it." And he goes, "I used to be head of Fender custom shop, and half of everything that we make was relict. And so, when a company like that can see the appeal of what we're doing, you kind of feel that you're along the right lines, really." So yeah, we kept on doing this finish. We kept on, working out the formula of lacquer changes on a weekly basis when you buy lacquer from a lacquer company. So we managed to get them involved in making our own lacquer for us, which is all made actually in London. And so it's nice to have a British product that we can get hold of it easily, and they do a great job. So it's kind of, all these little things that go to make up a great guitar, and it takes years and years to get there. You'll change the shape of a headstock, like our sort of pyramid headstock there. I remember changing that, and suddenly that started to be popular. And so you're just getting the ingredients of what becomes a classic model, really. So gradually we've done that, and more and more shops have got involved, and then you start selling internationally. You start having to go to guitar shows internationally, and you meet more and more people, and then players start using them. And for us in the workshop, knowing that great players are using our guitars is a really good thing. And we never give a guitar away either. So any player that you see using our guitars has bought it. And I think that's a real testament to the fact that if some of those people get given guitars all the time, and if they put their hand in their pocket, it usually means they're going to use it. And they'll often use them in studios, and you'll meet a player and find out that they're endorsed by a big company, but they can't, show our guitar, but they're using it on their recordings and things like that. So in the industry, you've got this sort of underground thing that people know that what we're doing, and it goes around like that. That's kind of it in a nutshell. There's been so much more probably than that I can elaborate on. I think maybe it's a good time to open up some questions. I know Sarah's been taking questions online. We're filming this tonight, so this will go up on YouTube. So if you've got any friends who haven't been able to come, it will be on our YouTube channel in a week or so. But what have you got there, Sarah?
Somebody said my old Atkin had a Hiscox case.
Hiscox.
They changed.
Oh, right, yeah. So Hiscox cases. Well, we used Hiscox cases for a long time. They're made in the UK, and they're great cases. But we ended up getting to know TKL, and they make all the Gibson cases, a lot of cases for Martin and Collings. The ones that we buy are from Canada, and they kind of give our guitars a good vibe. They look like an old sort of fashion case, but weirdly recently, because of all the craziness going on in the States, we've reconnected with Hiscox. So we might start using a few Hiscox if people are into. Does anyone have a love for cases? Some people find them boring, some people, but if you're guitar makers, the case is something that really sets a guitar off. And there's a romance to like old Gibson cases from like the 20s and the 30s, and they're almost as good as the guitars that are in the case. So it's yeah, it's one of those things that we geek over. But yeah, that's why we changed that. Anything else from that?
Also got, what famous players do you make guitars for, and who are the labels?
All right. So lots of famous players. Lately, Seal ordered 3 guitars off us, which was great. He ordered one, and he really liked it. And then he ordered another one. Then he wanted one for his guitar player. And then, do you know who Trevor Horn is? Like the producer. So Seal said he was playing his guitar. Actually, he's lefty. Playing his guitar and singing Trevor this new song. And Trevor went, "Oh, it's lovely. What sort of guitar is that? It sounds brilliant." And then Seal just phoned me up and said, "Can you make one for Trevor as well?" And so that's a nice thing. We've been working with Justin Hawkins a lot from The Darkness. In fact, this is one of his signature model electrics, which we got into electric guitar making during lockdown, and yeah, Justin was playing one of our acoustic guitars on his Justin Hawkins Rides Again, and someone texted me and sent me the link to the video. And when you're my age, The Darkness were just one of those bands that you fell in love with instantly. So I sent it to the lads. We were all dancing around the workshop going, "Yes, Justin's got a guitar." And then I just texted on his Instagram, and he got straight back to me, and yeah, we started working on some electric guitars. Yeah, a bloke from the band America. What's his name, Paul?
Jerry Beckley.
Jerry Beckley. Yeah. So we get these sort of random people that we don't really necessarily know, you know, and it's nice when that sort of thing happens. And then these guitar. In fact, there's this guy called off Stranger Things called is DeJo, D-J-O, Joe, DeJo. Don't know what his name is, but he's been using it. One of our 19s on Coachella. What was it? Coachella, the big festival, and he's been on American TV. So it's weird how these guitars go off and have a life of their own, and absolutely nothing to do with us. It just make it, and it goes out there. So that's kind of cool as well.
And then we've got the last one is, do you connect much with other guitar makers and who?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have we've got a little WhatsApp group with one of the guys from Collings and Iris Guitars. Do you guys have any Iris guitars in here?
Not today.
Not today. Well, they're another great American maker, a bit like us. So if you have not heard of Iris guitars, go and try them. They're brilliant. So we're all of the guitar makers, once you get to a certain point, because you meet each other at guitar shows, we're all on WhatsApp groups, and we're all trying to find wood and trying to work out where this part comes from or that part comes from, and how did you do that, and can you make a little video for us for this? And it was always my experience when I got involved that the Americans were much more open about telling you how to do stuff. In England, you'd meet a guy in a shed and he'd go, "Took me 50 years to learn this, I'm not telling you." And the Americans are just like, "Yeah, man, it's yeah, sure." And they'd write you a formula for how to do something. And it was so lovely. And I always thought to myself, if ever anybody asked me anything, I'm going to tell them how we do it. And it doesn't mean they can do it. That's the thing, you know. It's one of those sort of, if someone persists and they are willing to put the time in, they're going to learn themselves. But giving them a helping hand along the way is great. So yeah, we're all quite close, and there's not actually that many sort of guitar makers of that sell in shops. So yeah, we tend to know each other. Has anyone got any questions themselves? Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about the aging of the finish, but what about the aging of the wood? At what stage did you start doing that?
Right. Well, we started noticing when you send guitars to, say, the eastern seaboard in America, like the East Coast and sort of Canada and say Norway, their winters kill guitars. It's terrible, you know. So you'd send a guitar, it's perfect. It'd be in that winter for a year, and it'd be like, oh, my guitar's sort of moved a lot, and what are we going to do about this? And again, I got in touch with Collings about that, and they said, well, this is what we do. You bake your wood. You have to do these things. And so a friend of mine had a Smeg oven that was like a big, wide Smeg oven that he was getting rid of. And so it was actually in Blackheath, and we came up to London and got this Smeg oven, plumbed it in, and it's better than the oven I have in my kitchen. But we do all of our baking in that oven. So we bake all we bake all the tops, unless they're mahogany. We bake all the braces for the tops and the backs. And on the electric guitars, we buy roasted maple from Nova Scotia. And there's a guy just outside Halifax who's completely geeky about this. And I went there last summer, and we were watching how he does this. And yeah, so there's that whole thermal side of things to guitar making that everyone's probably come across in the last 10 years or so isn't a gimmick. It's a really brilliant thing, and what it does, and if there's a scientist here, they're going to tell me that my terminology is all wrong and that it probably doesn't make sense, but it kind of makes sense in my head. You bake this stuff, and it really dries out the wood, and it crystallizes the resins apparently within it. And when you take a piece of wood out of the oven, you see that a lot of the resin has bled out of it, and so it's as dry as it can be. So once it's dry like that, it can't take on the same amount of moisture that it once had. So it really seals it in. But it does a great thing for the sound as well, and it really makes a new guitar sound like a bedded-in old guitar, and that's a major part of our sound as well. I think it was a night and day thing. It really does make a huge difference.
Actually, that does sound completely sensible, and I am a scientist.
Are you? Oh, good. Can I have an honorary degree? No. Yeah. And we have rooms at work where we store wood in very dry conditions, and we dehumidify. And so we'll buy wood a year in advance, and we'll put it into these rooms. We'll put it into these rooms, and it will naturally dry, and we've got fans going in there as well. So it's a little bit of knowing exactly what a piece of wood's going to do. It's very difficult to know, but you can get as close as possible if you've got the time. Buying brand new wood and using it is not a nice place to be. You want to make sure, you know, a wood dealer could tell you that it's dry, and we've got meters, but with the best wood in the world, you can't go into the centre of that wood and find out what it's doing. So we tend to try to buy ourselves as much time as possible, but that involves a huge investment, as you can imagine. And at the moment, we're making close to 700 guitars a year. So buying that amount of wood and locating that amount of wood is difficult as well, especially. Where's Tom? Here we go. You ready for it? The Brexit rant. Yeah. No. So getting wood into the country now is much harder than it used to be. For woods that are on certain lists, Indian rosewood and African mahogany is like that now. So to get timber from one of the big dealers, and everyone uses them, is in Spain, and we used to be able to order wood on a Monday and receive it on a Friday for rosewood, for example, and now that will take 4 months to get that into the country. But what that will also involve is us buying the wood, them applying for a CITES license in Spain, say, them sending us the license, us going to DEFRA, applying for our license, and then marrying these two up, hoping they're going to meet somewhere in transit. And there's been lots of stories of things being, you know, stuck in places because weirdly it's all done in paper still with a stamp, you know, in the digital world. And so it's become really difficult to get stuff into this country. But we've worked it out, and we've all, and the positive side is that we're probably using more UK wood dealers. But what that has meant is that prices have had to go up because they don't have the same buying power as the Spanish. But we've got a few great wood dealers in this country, so we're lucky. We've got a good connection here. Yeah. Anybody else got any questions?
Yeah, on the electric guitars, what's the kind of tuning stability like? Because you've got one there with the locking tuners.
Yeah.
And you've got this one here which looks very interesting. So would you have like locking tuners like Fender do on
Well, so typically this guitar here, which is called a Bush offset, that doesn't have locking tuners. That's just got a standard sort of Goto tuner on it. We start using the locking tuners when we're using the either a Floyd Rose or a 2 pin Goto bridge that, you know, is doing a lot more movement. But the stability is really good. The wood is very stable for the necks, and everything that we do is plecked as well. So it's all been set up under tension and then fret leveled. So it's got the best chance of being stable. Making things completely stable is always going to be hard, but I think on an electric guitar it's easier than on an acoustic guitar. So
And where do you source the wood from?
So the body wood that we use on most of our electrics is a beachy, which is an African hardwood, but it grows reasonably fast, so it's quite sustainable. But it's also got a really nice weight, and you're seeing a beachy a lot more now. It's become quite a standard wood. It machines really nicely, and I'd encourage you guys to pick these up actually, because they just feel like, you know, a really comfortable weight, and I think it's become much more popular to have a guitar that isn't breaking your back. Yeah, and so on this we've got Indian rosewood on the fingerboard. We buy that in the UK now. So yeah.
They're all humbuckers, so they're no single hole.
So all the pickups are wound in house by Lawrence over there. So those are P90s, single coils. We've got humbuckers here, so that's one of our Super 63s. So yeah, that's got the locking tuners and the Goto 2-point trem as well.
I was wondering how your experiences in making guitars over this time has changed your playing.
My own playing? Oh, geez, yeah. I think the biggest thing that has changed is the amount of guitar playing I do, which nowadays isn't that much. And it's so strange when you make guitars, all those things that, you know, you loved before you made guitars suddenly become a bit normal, you know. So sadly, you know, you can walk into a guitar shop and see some of the best guitars in the world. It's like, you know, but when something really amazing stands out, you notice it. But yeah, I think my guitar playing hasn't come on for 20 years. I think I learnt dadgad, you know, 20 years or 30 years ago, and I probably took the Bob Dylan sort of method of going, well, that would do, won't it? You know, and so I'm not really a practicer, but I do find myself sometimes thinking, right, I need to spend a bit of time. And recently, I took one of the Bush guitars home and thought I'm going to become Ry Cooder next, and so I'm trying to learn slide guitar, but it's taking a while. Yeah. Yes.
I spoke a lot about how important it is to you to kind of maintain the magic as you've got bigger as a company.
Yeah.
What does that mean in practice? How do you do it? Yeah.
It means that you don't compromise, and it means that you keep a very close eye on every part of the production, which is easier said than done. And you know, there are times when you sort of notice, go, oh, we need to rein that in a little bit more and get back to where we were. And I think our team's small enough that we're all quite connected. So if someone's noticing a situation, we can pick up on it really quickly. And I think that stuff goes by the wayside in those bigger factories, and the production sort of team, and we've all seen those pictures of the big factories, and honing in on small things becomes more difficult, I think. So yeah, it's about being honest and you know, knowing when you've done a boo-boo and going, right, we need to really sort this out. And but I'm very confident that what we do is done with the utmost passion. No one's sort of feeling, you know, like they're in a situation where they can't say if something's not working. And the guys who work for me are all passionate. So when you've got that in the building, that's almost the most important thing. And a lot of these guys weren't guitar makers. They were people who wanted to do something well, and so they were infused by the environment, I think. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything to ask? Yes.
What made you start with electric guitars? Because, you know, when you think about your history, you've made a great reputation on acoustic.
Yeah.
So I can, you know, I get why. Okay, fair enough. You can expand your range.
Yeah.
There aren't many manufacturers who do a really good job at both.
No, there aren't. There aren't.
And I wonder, like, what were you thinking when? That sounds really sorry. It wasn't
No, it's a brilliant question. No, this is a brilliant question because it is. Right? No. It's a brilliant question, and the real answer is this: that in the building there's geeky people who you know, it's always been my thing not to be in an environment where you can't wake up one morning and decide to do something new. And so many of the other makers have to go to a boardroom and they have to talk to the people who pay, you know, the investors and all that sort of thing. And I never wanted that environment. And so, you know, harebrained ideas, yes, let's get on with it. And during COVID, when we shut down for 3 months, we started sort of texting each other. And I think we're just sort of sending pictures of guitars, and someone sent a picture of an electric guitar, and it's like, wow, that'd be cool. And at the time, I think I was looking at, I thought I might buy a custom shop Strat or something, and I started looking, and then when you're in our situation, you look, you kind of go, hang on a minute, we've just got to make something, and we set off just to make one electric guitar, and then once we were down that road, we realised that we're actually got something quite good going actually, and that we should probably try and make it happen. But again, a lot of that's down to making people happy who work for you, who want to do something and have the passion. Lawrence had always wanted to wind pickups, and I'm thinking, crikey, that's brilliant, isn't it? Let's do that. And the first 2 electric guitars we made were versions of this 85, and I don't know if anybody saw them, but they were like Charvel kind of Jackson inspired, with the pointy headstock and with all the Floyd Rose, and it had this sort of finish that looked like the hoverboard from Back to the Future, and we released it on April Fool's Day because we knew it was such a sort of so far away from what we're about. We just thought it'd be a laugh, really, and we got the most coverage from any post that we ever had, and we got into all of those roundups for the April Fool's gags alongside all the big players, and we just thought, right, let's keep going, and then people started ordering them, and it just sort of, we don't make a lot of them, but it's one of those things that we're passionate about, and an electric guitar brand in this climate is a very difficult thing to grow and to stand out in. But you know, Graham Coxon used one at one of the Mind Horns at Wembley. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's throwing it up in the air and catching it. It's on their album cover. You know, so when stuff like that happens, you think you've just got to carry on, really. So yeah, that's how that happened. Yeah. Oh, God knows what we're going to make next. Did you have a question?
I guess further to that, what is it you think that you're looking for when you're making your acoustics and your electrics? What is it you're looking out for? Is it a certain sound or a certain feel to them? What?
It's all of the above. It's got a guitar is unlike, or a musical instrument is unlike so many things. Like if you're a furniture maker, you make something that's functional, you make something that looks beautiful, but it doesn't have to sound any good, does it? You know, and you get that sort of thing. That those factors, you have to keep all of them going, because if one of them slips, then it's over. You know, guitar players, and I include myself, are all geeky weirdos that just get infatuated with these small, minute things. We all read the stuff. We don't really know necessarily whether it makes a difference or what makes a difference, but it's all about that. It's about sort of making something that's special and that connects with people to make music happen. And that's really what it's about, is music. Yeah. Yes?
Banjos?
Ooh. Banjos. Yeah, well, one day maybe. I wouldn't be averse to making banjos. I do like the banjo. But I think we're probably going to make mandolins first. We've made a couple of mandolins, but we never really got them into production because we're busy on everything else. But, yes?
Sorry, what kind of bracing do you use for all the
So,
different range?
well, across the board, I think I'm right in saying, is there anything that stands out? It's all X bracing. It's all scalloped. So the X brace goes across here like this, and then it's scalloped here, and then there's two transverse braces, and those are scalloped as well. So we're trying to get the top moving and just get the lightness, and again, that's a very sort of close tolerance that you have to work to. So yeah, mostly X bracing, yeah. We've done other things at times, but the production stuff is all X bracing. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else they'd like to know? Well, I'm just going to say thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been all right, and I've enjoyed talking to you all. And we're going to stick around. You can try some guitars out. Yeah, if anybody wants to come and say hello, and yeah, we've got some T-shirts here as well, doing special deals on those. Don't know what those are yet, but Paul's at the back there. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you so much for listening and for your support. It means so much to have you all here tonight. It's been amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that was amazing. Met some amazing people here. Guitar have been fantastic. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it didn't waffle too much. I can tend to go on a bit. But if you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. We hope to do this again up in London. So keep an eye on our social media, and we'll be back again. So thanks for watching. Cheers.